Okay, so let's have a look at how we get from the mines that we've been speaking about in this morning session all the way through to a laptop that you might buy. So minerals mining for tin, tantalum, tungsten, gold is not limited to the DRC. In fact, in majority cases, it is not the predominant mining source around the world. There are multiple mining sources around the world that are not associated with the conflict here in the DRC. So some of the metals used in our product will come from Australia or even US or China, just different places around the world. But some of the minerals do originate in the DRC, as we've heard this morning. They then take a number of trading steps, both in the Central African region and then even outside the region, and eventually arriving at metal smelting facilities where raw ore is processed into refined metal. The metal is then sold to people who want to make metal compounds, such as solder paste, and then those solder paste would be sold to a component manufacturer who would make a printed circuit board, who would then sell that to somebody who was maybe assembling a hard disk drive, who would then sell that to somebody who was assembling a laptop computer, who would then sell that to us for onward distribution into the retail market. So you see how many steps there are from mine to market and how much influence we have to work up through this extended network. It's further complicated by the fact that each of these steps, there's not one actor. Okay, so in the case of final assembly supplies for laptop computers, even for one type of computer, you may have 2 or 3 different suppliers. Underneath them, you may have tens of component suppliers. There's probably tens of solder paste suppliers around the world that can feed those different suppliers. So the logic of who is supplying who in this chain is very, very complicated. And about 2 years ago, when the industry started realizing that we had to face this challenge, we looked at mapping how this chain worked, and we came to the conclusion that the place where we had the most control was actually at this point here, in the smelting process. After that time, the minerals take a very wide span and are very difficult to track. This is the point at which we can have most lever on the situation. And so the solution that the industry has been working on is a 3-phase approach centered around the smelters. The EICC, which was mentioned in my brief, is the Electronics Industry Citizenship Coalition, and we work with another group who are representatives of telecom industry, and we defined a process that is just being rolled out, which is a conflict-free smelter program, an auditing program that we have developed in conjunction with experts to assess whether the smelters know the origins of the minerals that they're procuring and if they are from the DRC, if they are conflict-free or not. That conflict-free smelter program, like I said, is in place and moving quickly forward. Beneath that, it's crucial that we establish legitimate mechanisms for legitimate processes for clean, if you want, clean minerals to arrive out of the DRC. It's no point the smelters trying to find conflict-free minerals if there aren't the processes in place in the DRC and surrounding countries to certify that this mineral is from a good place or wasn't tainted by some of the financial distortion that takes place there, or if it isn't, or if it's from a conflict-free location. That distinguishing between which minerals in the DRC are conflict-free or not is extremely challenging based on some of the discussion you heard this morning. And at this time, there is no way to do it. And so we've been working with the tin industry and the OECD, who are defining guidelines for how to do due diligence and make sure that the minerals in the country are going to smelters in the right way. Moving to the other end of the stream, as HP, we're far away from the smelter and far away from in-region certification mechanisms, but we have a responsibility to ask our suppliers, are you sourcing your components from people who are sourcing their components from people who are sourcing their minerals from smelters that are good smelters, who are sourcing their minerals from the right schemes in the DRC? The due diligence around this entire supply chain is extremely lengthy and complex. But it, like I said, falls into these three categories. Our due diligence of our supply chain procurement policies, linking to the conflict-free smelter program, linking to the establishment of legitimate sources of conflict-free minerals in the region. And as an industry and as HP, we've been active in each three levels because there's no point in us demanding conflict-free material in our supply chain if there isn't conflict-free material ready in the region. So we have to work up each step in order to maximize the impact on the problem there in the territory. So I think just in thinking about, we're not there yet and we need to keep working, and what I want to get across is that in general this is true and it has been true for conflict minerals. The key to resolving something this far away from you is to act as a multi-industry effort, and that takes time and politics and all those things, but it's absolutely crucial that we try to see international harmonization. So we mentioned this morning the US legislation. It helps if we have policies around the world that are the same so that we can all have the same push around the world. And finally, very, very critical in this particular situation is to act in a multi-stakeholder way because we, far away from the DRC, in industry, we have no idea what the right answers are. And so we need to work with NGOs and people on the ground who can help us to understand, are we doing the right thing with the processes that we're putting in place? And so Patricia's going to speak more about that multi-stakeholder approach that we've taken and some of the things we've been able to achieve with that. Thank you.
All right, so I just threw up here a couple of broad categories, and when I say multi-stakeholder, and I don't know how familiar you all are with that term or not, but this is basically what I'm looking at. It's both private and public, civil society, can include governments, and it includes universities. And there's different leverage points that each of these stakeholders have, and also different expertise. As Zoe mentioned, you know, they're very far away from what's happening on the ground in the Congo, and they're looking towards others to offer guidance, not just on how you ensure that conflict-free minerals can be coming out of the Congo, but in addition to supply chain responsibility, how do you really have peace and security in the Congo? And the previous panel spoke about that a bit, is that there's a lot of political will that needs to happen. There's a lot of diplomatic activity, both on the part of the US government, other international governments, regional governments, and then the Congolese government. So the background I come from, or where I've been working for the last several years, has been on the socially responsible investment movement and faith-based investors, and how those investors can bring issues to the attention of companies. And where we see a big risk for investors in with company practices, you know, we want to make sure that companies are addressing these situations responsibly so that there isn't the risk, there isn't the reputational harm that happens from people wanting to boycott a company or picket in front of their stores, that type of thing, all the way through to and actually the you know, HP and others having a real intention to ensure that there isn't child labor, forced labor, environmental destruction, human rights, egregious human rights abuses, you know, that they're indirectly contributing to. And so I feel privileged actually with the group that we've started to put together, is that some of the companies in that group really are what I consider the leaders in the industry, and they're the ones who are really stepping up to the plate and saying, no, we really don't want this in our supply chain, and we're willing to take the steps necessary and set up the systems to ensure that it's not happening.